All right. All right.
Ready?
Yep, everybody ready? Yep. All right. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the City of Winter Springs City Commission meeting. A special meeting agenda is set for Thursday, October 18th, 2025. Christian, would you call the roll, please?
Mayor Kevin McCann.
Present.
Deputy Mayor Cade Ruthning.
Present.
Commissioner Paul Diaz.
Present.
Commissioner Victoria Bruce.
Present.
Commissioner Sarah Baker.
Present.
Commissioner Mark Caruso.
Present.
City Manager Kevin Sweet.
Present.
City Attorney not present.
If we could all stand for a moment of silence to be followed by the pledge. I might ask that we certainly think about neighbors, or excuse me, those that are been affected by shootings in both Providence, Rhode Island, and in Australia. I would ask excuse me, a prayer for my son who's in the hospital. I'd appreciate that. Thank you. The pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Excuse me, guys. Sorry about that. Okay, any agenda changes? We simply have one item on the agenda.
No, sir.
Anything else? Nope. Okay. Then we'll jump right to public input. This is the first. There'll be one now, and there'll be one when we're finished. Anyone who wishes to speak during public input on any agenda item or subject matter will need to fill out a blue public input form. Individuals will limit the comments to 3 minutes, and representatives of groups or homeowners associations shall limit their comments to 5 minutes unless otherwise determined by the City Commission. I have one form here for Jerry Wood. Good evening, sir. If you would state your name and if you are a resident or not.
I'm honored to go first.
Hey, thanks.
My name is Jerry Wood. I'm a resident of Spring Avenue in the unincorporated part of Seminole County, just below the Greenway Interchange Zoning District on the South Shore of Lake Jessup.
All right.
I'm an environmental engineer. I've been the caretaker owner of that property more or less for 30 years, and still. I say caretaker because when I go, it'll still be there. So, and own it for only so long. There are a couple of issues that I brought forward before the commission. It's been some time, and it related to this study. We've had serious flooding in that zone for a long time. And Ian didn't just start it. It started with, well, Charlie was more of a whiplash, but Irma dropped 11 inches of rain, more than the 100-year storm. And we started seeing the impacts of that rolling down that couple 100-acre, it was like a Burnout Grove, little small cattle farm and a weed factory, which is a couple 100 acres downhill to Lake Jessup. There's no control, no outfall. There's no program for stormwater control, and that's not uncommon for undeveloped property. But I think in this time and in these cases, it might also be good to consider how that is managed since the impacts are so heavy. By the way, I do represent the entire Clifton Springs. Well, not all of them, but I got like 10 people that sent me here. So I'd like to try to condense it. I did read the whole study. I don't know how many everybody else did, but you did?
No, I did read the study, but I was trying to give you 5
Oh, I
minutes
say
as well.
congratulations.
But I did.
If you did. It's not easy to do that. This is an enclave, and you're aware that it's a separate part of Seminole County that's actually surrounded by Winter Springs. And the Clifton Springs is one of your oldest historic sites. In fact, it predates the city of Winter Springs by almost 100 years. So it's something that people should actually take seriously. And we do have some serious problems there. We've had these floods breaking in through the east boundary of the springs. We did what we could to stop them, but it's kind of hard to fight nature. We're looking for a little bit of a better plan in the future. With regard to the study, I had a couple comments that might bring some work in the future. Two of the storms that were probably the most impactful here in the last 20 years, and maybe all my time here, were Helene and Milton, and they're not even on the list. I did see one mention of Milton for the Jetta Point flooding, but we had two 500-year floods in the same month, and that's not even in this study. So I don't want to be too negative about that, but how can you be doing a stormwater plan when you didn't consider the biggest floods we probably ever had? And I know that there's some reason for that, because the study took a long time. It was commissioned maybe in 22 or whatever. But I did mention to Seminole County on several occasions that they ought to at least put a footnote in the study that stated that there were some other impacts and floods and hurricanes that were not addressed, and they just blew that off. So I'm here to talk about that, just to get it in the record. The other thing I wanted to mention was that the area that I'm speaking of is in the Lake Jessup Basin. I haven't talked to the professionals yet, but Lake Jessup is a receiving water. And all the sub-basins go to Lake Jessup. Am I done?
Well, no, I'm just asking you to, yeah, it's been 5 minutes, but if you can just, you can
Okay.
keep going, but if you can get right to the point.
Having that in a Lake Jessup Basin that includes the whole lake just basically hid that out of the view of what's happening. If you look at the map on page, whatever, where you show the impacts, you don't see any dots or any concern about that whole area. And that was severely impacted by flooding. And I'm going to put some information in the record about the paths of Hurricane Milton and Helene, and they probably should get some attention in the future. I guess the only thing I want to add, since I'm limited in time, it's a little difficult to summarize a 173-page study in 5 minutes, but this is not going to go away. I will not let it. I spent 30 years protecting that Clifton Springs, and there are serious problems there. Maybe I need to come back some other time, or maybe you could do a workshop just on the GID and that part of the city all by itself, because it's a serious issue, and the fact that there's serious storms that have taken place that aren't in this study, you might find a way to reconcile how that impacts your ability to make this the final study. So
Okay, thank you. Loud and clear, good point to be made. Excuse me. Yeah. It is a beautiful area back there. Is there anyone else that would like to address the commission? Mr. Gallo.
Good morning, Art Gallo. I am a Winter Springs resident. Basically, I want to say that I'm a bit disappointed in the draft, but I don't mean to impugn the good work and the good hard work that was put into the stormwater study, because there's a lot of good things there. But I think it falls short, at least in two areas, especially when considering our discussions on Jetta Point Park and our streams, creeks, and ponds that are on private property. As a reminder, my HOA documented the flooding into the Howell Creek Reserve, especially Eagles Watch, to the county from Jetta Point Park in a letter back on 10 July, sent a copy to the city here, and again to the county on 10 November in an email where we documented all the problems from Jetta Point. And we personally briefed the city manager and utilities director, Commissioner Bruce, back on 25 September, the meeting here with our HOA board, some members of our board. This whole discussion was on all the water that comes from Jetta Point and the Oviedo area over there into our Howell Creek Reserve Community Association, especially over for our residents on the Eagles Watch side. So I think the master plan falls short in documenting this issue. Because this, if it's documented correctly, it would help with the county, state, and NRCS, and maybe even FEMA. So that I think there needs to be more solid documentation on these issues. A reminder, though, that our 5 creeks are used by the city to catch and convey stormwater into Lake Jessup. Howell Creek, used by the city and the county and state too, for this community service. In that regard, it is actually utilized as a utility. This is where I think we ignore it. We dump our stormwater into the creeks and streams. We use it just like we would other stormwater utility, but if it's on private property, well, there's no help. The city can't get involved or won't get involved. But on page 76 and 77, the city does mention public and private stormwater assets, and the plan recommended 2 times a year inspections for all the ponds and creeks, I assume, as well as other major storm events, because both public and private interests are involved. And if maintenance standards are not met, fines to the owners are recommended. So I remember at the last commission meeting, we weren't going to mention private stuff, but yet the private stuff is in here. And now we're going onto private property. We're inspecting ponds, and I assume Howell Creek, which is in between my HOA and Tuscaloosa Reserve HOA. So that's in there. So basically what I see is the city can inspect us on private property. They can even potentially fine us on private property, but we can't, if there's a problem with bank erosion or silt or debris removal, we don't address how we're going to cover that. And if we can put it and document it correctly in our stormwater master plan, that will provide for the city, the private residents, some ammunition to go to the county and the state to ask for help. So I would ask that in another write-up of the master plan that we take a look at these areas and try to expound on them. Even if the city can't fund them, we can use that as evidence to ask for help. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Young. Ms. Schaefer.
Good morning. First, this meeting being at 9 a.m., I am sorry most people cannot come at this time. And for a bunch of people up there on the dais that say that they want to be transparent, well, guess what? That's not very transparent. The Winter Springs Village are good stewards of our community. We spend $14,000 a year for the last, I want to say since 2017, we couldn't be exactly sure, pressure washing our sidewalks due to the slime that grows on them when we do get flooded. The Wetlands Park was not talked about. We have Big Blue on that property, and we are still using drinking water for our lawns. Also, our ponds are what you would call a hybrid. And because of this, the town center drains into our ponds. Since the last hurricane seasons, we have told residents, because of our flooding, that they should get flood insurance. I personally have flood insurance because of this, and I'm bringing it to your attention. I think it's important that we address these issues. I was told that Wetlands Park, St. John's Water Management District has an issue about the drainage of where the water is to go. Well, I know, you tell me who I call at St. John's Water Management District or Tallahassee or whatever, and we will tell our residents to get on it. They told me that we could never get a light out on Michael Blake. Guess what? I found a way. So you tell me who to call. You all have more juice than I do. And you can call that St. John's Water Management District and say, what is the deal? It's ridiculous. It's been 2 hurricane seasons. The plots were redone about that there is new drainage. The county came out with them. Nobody told anybody that. That's where, when I discovered that, I told the people in my development, you need to get flood insurance, and unless you want to be here. And all the people that have come to these meetings over the flooding of our properties in Winter Springs, and look at who's here today. This is sad. I'm just bringing that to your attention. This, during Christmas or whatever you want to say, is a wrong time. And I would say, table it, some of the people that they've made points, and we need to address it in the new year and give people real time to come to these meetings. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, so we'll close public input at this point, and we will move right on to item 500.
Can we get the presentation pulled up? Thank you. Good morning, Mayor McCann, City Commissioners. I'm Cleet Saunier, your Public Works and Utilities Director for the City of Winter Springs. And I'm joined here today with Kimley Horn and Associates, our stormwater consultants. Marcus Geiger would have been here. He's been an instrumental part of the team that has put this plan together. Unfortunately, he is ill today. In lieu of Marcus, we have Matt Brossman, PE, and we also have Logan Norris, all from Kimley Horn. And we also have David Hamstra, Pegasus Engineering, who provided peer review of the Stormwater Master Plan as an engineering consultant. As I mentioned, it's my privilege to present to you the culmination of 18 months of hard work by our consultants and staff involving thousands of hours of field work and engineering analysis, producing a blueprint that will be used to chart the city's course for creating and maintaining an effective stormwater management program many years into the future. This is the first critical step in identifying and codifying the city's stormwater needs into a comprehensive plan, and with your adoption of it today, be able to establish an effective rate plan to fund it all through over time. Subsequent to our adoption of this plan, we will return in January, and I think this addresses some of the comment you heard today, with a proposed pond maintenance policy for you to review and adopt that. And adopt that will also be part of the subsequent rate study. That's a huge endeavor. We feel like a separate meeting on the pond maintenance policy of the city, when you consider we have over 300 lakes and ponds in this city, not all of which are owned or maintained by the city. And that will come out specifically in that meeting in which we can address these hybrid lakes and ponds. This plan is really looking toward the future and what the major area-related improvements need to be, and put those on a capital improvement plan that we will be able to fund over time through rate revenue and other outside grants and funding sources. That will come after this is adopted, contingent upon your adoption, and after the pond maintenance policy is ratified by you as well, as to how much we want to take on in terms of the city maintaining not only the city ponds, but maybe some of these hybrids that are cross-pollinated, I guess would be a good way to describe that, in terms of who owns the rights to those ponds and who's responsible for them. That will also be folded into the rate study, which will come after that. We anticipate that rate study being at either the second meeting in January or potentially pushed into February to give everybody time to evaluate and understand where we're going with that. Before I call Matt, who's behind me here, up here, I'd like to go over the ground rules, which are typical for most of our presentations. Thankfully, Christian and his staff was able to provide you with hard copies of this presentation as well as copies of the Stormwater Master Plan itself. I would ask that you would take note of any questions you have until we get through the presentation. It's probably going to take about 40 to 45 minutes to run through it all. And then we will come back with a robust question and answer session to hopefully address most, if not all, your concerns leading into adoption of the plan as a first essential step before we can actually conduct a rate study. So with that, I'll turn it over to Matt. Thank you.
Thank you, Cleet, and thank you, Mayor McCann, commissioners.
My name is Matt Brosman, professional engineer with Kimley Horn. Happy to be here to give you an update on the stormwater master plan, as well as how it fits into the overall stormwater improvement program, where we've been, where we're at, where we're going, try to contextualize all that. I know that stormwater master plan document that you've got is a significant document, so appreciate your efforts in reviewing that and you know, collecting your input on that today. So just to kind of review the overall stormwater improvement program, this was a program that was conceptualized and bid as a 5-phase program. So I'll walk through all 5 phases of that. And really it was meant to be totally comprehensive. So identifying all of the existing infrastructure, all of the existing manpower, existing capital that the city has in terms of equipment, identify those needs, right, those stormwater needs, both in concert with the county's ongoing studies and the city's own independent study. Identify areas for those future capital improvements. And then, as Clete mentioned, those capital improvements plus that future pond maintenance policy adoption, have that feed into that future rate study. So this stormwater master plan and the associated capital improvement plan are as we said a few weeks ago, a prerequisite to developing that rate study, but one of those 2 significant pieces alongside the pond maintenance policy. And I apologize, there's something going on with the format, so the text might be a little bit hard to read, but I think your printed copies may be a little bit better. So where we've been, so we've been through the first 3 phases of the stormwater improvement program. Those phases being the drainage system inventory, phase 2, system maintenance and retrofit, and then the maintenance equipment and manpower phases. As I mentioned, I'll go through each of those, but primarily I'd say data collection efforts, very significant data collection efforts in kind of a few different formats. So phase 1 being the drainage system inventory. We attacked this from a couple of different directions. First, by collecting all the historic record drawings, historic plans that the city, county, other entities had available of the stormwater system. The city also had just some internal information on the stormwater system, but the really heavy lift here was really hundreds, if not thousands of hours in the field visiting all of these stormwater structures throughout the city. In addition to collecting information just on what those structures were, how they were connected to the surrounding infrastructure, we also took condition assessments. We sought to identify if a structure was in good, fair, or poor condition, and that is all going to work into eventually the financials for the maintenance program, right? Once we know how many structures are in need of immediate replacement or have limited life left versus they have significant life left, that will all be worked into the maintenance program. In addition, we looked at things like sedimentation or blocked structures, marked those for maintenance. And again, yeah, just that all that is going to work into the overall maintenance plan. In addition to just identifying the current health of the system, this will also create the backbone of the future maintenance tracking system that we envision the city stormwater staff being able to maintain and continually use to track maintenance status of structures. So you'll see in the stormwater master plan, we made recommendations about inspection frequency. The really only way that we can track that is by having a solid inventory of the stormwater system and then having maintenance staff mark when when that maintenance has occurred, so that we can ensure that maintenance is occurring at a regular interval and evenly across the city. And this is just an example of kind of what that data collection in the field looked like. We were using a GIS system to take photos, inventory information, note what type of structure, each structure that we visited. So we have a lot of really rich data that came out of this data collection effort. Again, that's going to inform that future maintenance program and serve as a really solid backbone for that maintenance tracking system. So phase 2, this was another data collection effort, but less focused on the specific infrastructure in the ground, but more about that historic, the historic flooding complaints, work orders, damage reports from the various hurricanes over the years. That was some of the data that we collected as part of this phase. This was also the time where we got the draft Seminole County, or I guess like the first draft of the Seminole County basin studies that overlap with the city limits. And so using some of the draft results from that, as well as the drainage complaints, as well as the conditions of the stormwater infrastructure that we collected in phase 1, we were able to start identifying focus areas. The Seminole County studies also identified focus areas, of course, on a little bit larger of a scale. So we cross-referenced those as well. So this is where we started to get a little bit more detailed in identifying where the areas of focus and ultimately of potential capital improvements to be incorporated to the stormwater master plan. Related to that phase 1 stormwater inventory, the field inventory, this is the outcome of that. So again, you can see the very rich data that we have across the entire city. The colors indicate the good, fair, or poor condition of the given structure. So all those locations where you see a colored dot, conditions as well as photos of the structure were recorded. So again, we have a really rich understanding of the city's stormwater system. That again will be built off of in the future. So phase 3 was the manpower and maintenance equipment phase, and so this is, I hate to say like each of these phases as being a data collection effort because it sounds like we're collecting a lot of data, but this is where we were starting to, along with the help of our subconsultant Raftellus, a financial services subconsultant, start to identify where we're at in terms of manpower and equipment. So not just what equipment we have, but what is its condition? What is the annual maintenance cost? What's the remaining useful life of all of that capital equipment that we have? When are we planning to replace it? How much does it cost to replace? All of this is very important to understand the overall cost of that maintenance program. What equipment do we not have, but we need in order to proactively maintain this stormwater system that now we have an understanding of how large it is and how many structures we have? What kind of staff do we currently have? What are their capabilities and responsibilities? And then how much additional staff will we need in order to meet the desired frequency and level of really maintenance service to the overall stormwater system, now that we understand how big that system is, what's our current staffing, what are our future staffing needs. This is what we looked at in this phase. With respect to those primary responsibilities, understanding the pond maintenance policy has been kind of an ongoing discussion and will continue to be. This is where, as we worked through this phase, we identified the potential significant financial swing that policy could have on the overall plan's financials. which is why, as Clete mentioned, we're planning to come to the January 12th meeting with some more information on that, and are looking to get direction from the commission on a direction forward on that pond maintenance policy at that time. So that's where we've been. Where we are now is at phase 4, which is the development of the Stormwater Capital Improvement Program, and which is contained within the Stormwater Master Plan. So the Stormwater Master Plan, its intent is to capture all of the both the capital and maintenance considerations for the stormwater system. It's really intended to be a guide for how the city should run its stormwater program into the future. And a significant piece of that is the Stormwater Capital Improvement Plan, but that's contained within the Stormwater Master Plan. So that Stormwater Master Plan is what you've got in front of you. As we shared a few weeks ago, the draft that you have, or the document you have, is the final draft. One of the significant changes that happened during the development of the Stormwater Master Plan, anticipated, but I guess significant developments, was the completion of Seminole County's 5 basin studies that overlap with the city limits. So that's G Creek, Howell Creek, Little Lake Howell, Soldiers Creek, and the Lake Jessup watershed model. Those 5 watershed or basin models were finalized by the city. I think they just received final approval last week, but they were essentially complete a few months ago, and were incorporated to the Stormwater Master Plan. That was important because then we were able to, we already had some concepts of where some of those improvements would have benefit, not just to the area specifically where the project is proposed, but to the overall watershed and to areas upstream and downstream of the project. And so since those models got completed, we were able to take the proposed improvements and incorporate them to those models to verify what the impacts would be within the entire watershed of implementing any of the projects in the plan. So as part of the planning process, we identified 46 areas of interest, and those were used to then further identify 12 capital improvement projects. So as we talk about these 46 AOIs and then the 12 projects, I just want to kind of contextualize that those 12 projects are larger scale, I would say almost like regional projects. Again, projects that will have an impact outside of just the area where they are, like where construction will happen, right? Because we try to identify areas where that investment would improve conditions in the entire surrounding area, where we weren't just talking about a 1 or 2 storm structures at a corner. We were talking about a crossing of the creek with like upsizing an existing crossing, or doing channel improvements, significant improvements that would have wide-ranging impacts. So what is that capital improvement plan? So that CIP, it's a multi-year plan to identify and prioritize these major infrastructure projects. It has a significant financial impact. The size of the entire program, as well as the schedule upon which that program is implemented, is going to have a significant impact on what that rate and what that rate study ultimately looks like. The CIP, it's a long-range planning tool that, again, there's that scheduling piece of it that the city has to determine what is the speed at which this plan will be implemented based on the urgency and the nature of the needs, as well as how that funding can be allocated. project costs are included, and it's not just construction costs, it's engineering and permitting services, as well as potential for land or easement acquisition. Things like wetland impacts were also considered in terms of developing the costs, costs to, if a project was proposed, anticipated to have any kind of wetland mitigation banking or significant permitting or land acquisition costs, all of those were incorporated to the capital costs for each of the projects. So again, going back to how we identified those projects, we looked at the overall capacity for a project to reduce flooding. That might go without saying, but that was the primary goal of these projects, is to alleviate structural flooding and also minimize roadway overtopping. So as you read through the report, you'll see some discussion on something called a level of service. So for certain storm events, that we analyzed these projects in. We wanted to see, okay, how much road flooding is that going to? How much is that going to reduce road flooding? How much is that going to reduce flooding of structures that would currently occur if that storm were to happen today? So we used that level of service as a kind of standard benchmark upon which all of the projects were evaluated. Construction feasibility was also considered. Definitely wanted to propose projects that would be constructible and permittable. Some of these projects do have permitting. They will be difficult to permit. There will be permitting challenges, but we believe that all these projects are permittable. But that will impact the timeline and the cost of the projects as well.
I don't mean to interrupt, and I know the rules. Can you elaborate on that, though? You said that challenges to permitting. Just, can you elaborate on that point real quick?
Yeah, so some projects are proposing, like as I mentioned, wetland impacts. So wetland impacts, just in general, will increase the amount of time that permitting will take. It can also increase just the complexity and cost of permitting. So that's just an example of how permitting might be impacted by, or it might be more difficult to permit one project versus another. We might have to coordinate with additional agencies. It might just take more time, or there might need to be, again, I use wetland impacts as an example. If we're doing mitigation banking, the permit we'd have to get that mitigation banking lined up in order to then permit the project.
Thank you.
We also looked at downstream impacts. So we didn't want to propose a project of, all this water is getting trapped upstream in the watershed, and so we're just going to push it all downstream, and then everybody downstream will just deal with it. That wasn't something that we wanted to do, so we didn't just look at the project location, okay, things are better here, there's less flooding. We also looked at downstream, what are the impacts downstream? Are there impacts downstream, or are we able to, if we're able to get that water downstream, the impacts are minimal because maybe there's more, the houses are a little bit higher, or the roads are a little bit higher, versus where things are constrained further upstream. So we consider that each location is kind of unique, so that was something we really wanted to consider in identifying those capital projects. I'll mention with respect to the 46 areas of interest, one of the things that we did not consider out of those in order to move on to one of the 12 capital improvement projects were private areas that are owned and maintained by private entities, with the understanding that the capital improvement program that's coming out of this master plan, its intent is to propose improvements to the public system and to the system that will impact the greatest amount of public good, right? So we tended to be more focused on the public streams or like the creeks or the not the areas that are kind of more isolated within the private areas. There are some other considerations too. Some projects are smaller in scale and will areas that we identified as areas of interest might be improved still by some of the projects that we have proposed. So those areas of interest are still addressed. There's just not necessarily a project proposed right there. But some of those larger projects that we're proposing, because they have wider ranging impacts, they will inherently address some of those areas of interest. So once those projects were identified, we prioritized those projects using a project scoring criteria. This is very similar to the criteria that was used to identify the projects themselves. This was a weighted criteria, so a project would be scored higher if it performed better in any of the given criteria. And then each of these criteria, again, I apologize for the font things happening, but each of these criteria, all of those factors added up to 100% to an overall weighted score that each project, that was calculated for each project. So just to briefly cover each of these criteria, that downstream impact piece is what I was describing earlier. We didn't want, we awarded a project higher points if it was, or a higher score if downstream impacts were minimal to none. If a project had some level of downstream impact, it scored lower in this area relative to the magnitude of the impact. The 100-year and 25-year level of service, those were the, I'd say, two of the larger factors. So that is that improvement of reducing the amount of flooding on the roads, or reducing the amount of flooding of structures as a result of the project, the overall public benefit of the project in each of those two storm events was scored and weighted relative to one another. A number of areas of interest in the watershed, that was meant to capture if a given watershed had greater needs, one watershed versus another. We use that area of interest, that overall group of 46, to identify which watersheds had the most, in general, areas of interest, to use that as a weighted factor to essentially recognize that there's a maybe greater empirical need in that area because there are more areas of interest identified. Maintenance and acquisition considerations, this goes back to just the overall complexity of a project, like what we were talking about with permitting. Things like easement or land acquisition will be a complication to the project. We wanted to have that as a factor, as if two projects were otherwise identical, one that has to go through easement acquisition or land acquisition, we scored that a little bit lower. And then lastly, there might be one other factor on there that is being clipped, but the benefit per dollar spent, that factor, so I want to be clear that cost itself was not a standalone factor, but what we looked at is a ratio between the project's overall benefit in terms of reduced area of flooding, just overall reduction in flood area, versus the project cost, because we felt that was a good way to identify just overall public benefit versus the project cost. And so that became like an efficiency like ratio that we incorporated as part of the project scoring criteria. So this is the list of capital improvement projects. As I mentioned, there are 12. This is slide 1 of 2. This matches the list that you'll see both in the executive summary as well as I believe it's in near, I think it's section 6 or 7 of the report. These are I won't go over each project in detail. I think the master plan itself does a pretty good job of explaining that, but this is the first 6 projects and the next 6 projects. I'll note the project ID, those 2 letters or 2 or 3 letters there indicate the watershed that the project exists within. So there are those 5 watershed or basin studies, G Creek, Little Lake Howell, Lake Jessup, Soldiers Creek, and I don't think I said Howell Creek, Howell Creek. So that's just indicating which of the basins that the project is in. So that's where we're at now, and that's what we're, here to discuss adoption of. As far as where we're going, as we've alluded to, the pond maintenance policy is the second of those two significant financial decisions that need to be made in order to factor into the stormwater rate study. More development of the maintenance program. Again, part of that is going to be identifying the amount of staff, the amount of equipment, et cetera, and working that into the utility rate study. And then alternative funding sources, just identifying as part of the overall rate study in the future and implementation plan, identifying what those grants or potentially financing type funding strategies might be, and how much do we want to count on that in, that'll be part of the rate study discussion with Raftellus. So as far as project schedule, this is very similar to the schedule we showed you a few weeks ago. January 12th, so the Monday, second Monday of the year. Again, we're planning to come here and present on that pond maintenance policy and are looking for direction from the city on that. Monday, January 26th, 2 weeks later, if additional discussion is needed on the pond maintenance policy.
That one's been canceled.
Okay, I knew it was possibly about to be canceled, so I think we'll just move everything up 2 weeks. I know you got legislative days and all that. So we'll call that, I suppose, February 9th. If additional study is needed or additional discussion is needed on the pond maintenance policy, that may bleed over into that second commission meeting of the year. Otherwise, that's when we intend to have the first public presentation on the stormwater rate study. And then the commission meeting after that, whatever 2 Mondays from the 9th is, that is when we would be talking about presentation number 2, either presentation number 1 or presentation number 2, depending on if we got to presentation number 1 for the rate study at the previous meeting. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. I know we've got a format as well to follow, but.
Yeah, I will let everybody know, but then my tablet won't start, so it's out. So if we'll just kind of go by the, who would like to start with questions? Commissioner Crusoe.
Thank you for that presentation. I'm not going to hold you to this, but maybe you can answer this question. Are you familiar with possible grants involving the creeks at all? Anything?
I know that the city's been ongoing in pursuing and getting NRCS grants related to the creeks. I don't know if David, you have anything to add on any of the grant programs. I know that there are a plethora of grant programs, Resilient Florida, some of the state revolving fund type grants. As far as their applicability, that's something that we want to dive in more on once the projects are adopted and developing the rate study.
Okay, I'm just going to bring up one possible grant. And I did some research on it and looking into it after I met with Mr. Gallo at his beautiful home. And the situation behind his home, I think, is very serious. Mm-hmm. So the grant that I was informed about is a possible easement agreement grant that we can get that would benefit homeowners like Mr. Gallo, where we'd have to go onto his property and do the work that needs to be done in that creek. And city manager, if we can possibly look into that as well. I don't know if you know about it or if anyone is familiar with it. I didn't know about it until it was brought to my attention. So I think that could benefit a lot of homes as well, because we have a lot of problems with the creeks, of course.
Right.
Do we know if that's through DEP or?
I thought we were already working on getting easement rights to all the properties anyway.
No, I don't think so.
We voted on it, city manager?
We are actively working on some of that.
But this is a specific grant involving easement agreements.
They go together.
Can you define it a bit better?
I can't because I'm trying to get the information to reach out to those people, and I didn't get it yet.
We did identify a few grant programs in, I think it's the very last section of the report prior to the
Page 80.
appendices. That was not one of them. But it's definitely something we could look into.
Good, thank you.
Page
Other-
84, 85.
Other questions? Anyone? No? Okay, there is a.
Oh, wait, hold on. Are you done?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Anybody else have questions?
You go ahead.
That's what I just said, yeah.
Okay.
I'm looking for who's next.
Page 6 of the presentation on the image that's there. So combine 6 and the actual work, because that, you can see this, the west side, extremely hot on that image, right? I believe, if my math is correct, out of the 12 projects, 6 of them come out of the west side.
So there are, I would say, yeah, 5 or 6. There's 4 within the G Creek Basin, and then I believe there are 2 with Soldiers Creek.
Soldiers Creek as well.
Is that, yeah, Soldiers Creek, there's at least 1. And, yeah, so I think there's 5.
Okay. Yep, I've got 5, possibly. Anyway, is this in order as you put the projects together, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, or are we focusing on an area? Because I know you said you're looking at which way things are going, but as you put this together, is it 1 through 12?
So there's a title, you can see either in the executive summary or if that's where you're looking, that is the order of the project prioritization, which should align with this order that you see right here.
Yeah. I've
Specifically.
got it right here.
Okay.
So that should align with this order that you see on the
Right.
slide. That is based on that ranking, that project ranking criteria. Yes, project number 1 is the project that scored the highest using that ranking criteria. Now I want to be clear, that's not to say that will be 100% the very first project implemented. This is a data point, right? This is based on those criteria of, that is laid out on this slide, right? That is to say, this project scores the highest using this criteria. And all of these factors, it's basically the one that has that highest score, but it doesn't mean that will be the first one implemented. It's up to the city to determine that implementation schedule in part as part of the rate study. So the schedule in which that gets implemented and then how those projects actually get implemented, if, it's at the city's discretion to say, well, this project that's ranked number 3, we've got a utilities project right there. So we really want to try to align this project getting in the ground at the same time as that utilities project, or whatever the city's priorities are. That you're not locked into implementing a project exactly in this order, but it's simply from a needs perspective and an essentially overall project benefit perspective. This is the order of ranking.
And again, permitting and a lot of other outside influences get determined that.
Which I understand that. So back to your comment, this is where I want to make sure I'm clear. Downstream impacts, right? That's your big thing. If we look at Alton Road and we say that's where we're going to be, that is a huge, and I'm sure you've seen it during a storm. I know you have, you walked it with me. I mean, we're talking water just fills out, right? So if we're going to fix that downstream, but then skip a couple of others, then what does the downstream effect after that occur? Because if we fix the one problem, a couple of the others are also problems related to number 1. Am I making sense to the water people?
Yeah, so I guess what I'll say is that each project's downstream impact was looked at specific to that project. We didn't look at it as, for instance, like project number 4.
What's the unintended consequences of fixing that first one?
Right. Now, these projects, I will say that the G Creek projects, those are really intended to ultimately work together because they are, near one another. But that's not to say that they can't be implemented in this.
Right.
The intent would be to implement them in these phases as shown.
Okay.
And each improvement, some of it is just channel improvement, some of it is, so like in the Alton Road example, that one, there's a pipe replacement as well. So that impact, I think what you're saying is that if there's a project downstream of that, if we open up Alton Road and let all that water through, then are we going to be causing a problem for the downstream piece?
Exactly.
That was what was essentially considered in this scoring.
Okay.
So I don't know each project sub-score, but even if there were, I'd say the other factors outweighed that in that particular case that caused it to be prioritized higher.
Okay.
I hope that answered your question.
It does. And just to City Manager and Cleet, that's sort of what I was looking at, the unintended consequences. I always try to look at us thinking about that as we go through it.
Yeah, that's why we wanted that to be a factor, to capture the potential for those unintended consequences to hurt a project's ranking if it were causing that, right?
Got
And again, that's where the order that's on here may not be the order that the city chooses to implement these projects. It's just the prioritization based on that framework.
Got it. My last question, because I did not see this in the big document, maintenance equipment and manpower costs, where we are, what we think the assumed future costs would be for the actual equipment.
So,
And I may have missed it in here, but I did not see that in here.
yeah, so that specific data is not in the stormwater master plan report, where our subconsultant Ralph Tellis is preparing a separate document that will cover all of that.
As we think about this, Clete, do we have an idea of future costs? Because I think that's part of what we need to think about today as well. A little bit.
In terms of maintaining the infrastructure,
Well, and I don't know if we're looking at just, and you can guide me here, because we're not looking at dollars and cents today, we're just looking at this master plan.
correct.
But dollars and cents would be the January 12th meeting?
What we're doing here is taking the CIP, a proposed CIP plan.
Okay.
Here are the 12 priority projects. We're going to hand that to Raftellus and say, okay, do your magic and make sure the rates that we can afford will fund this. Is it going to be 5 years, 10 years, 20 years?
Got it.
And then fold that into the maintenance of that same system as it comes online to be able to have that as well. And Raftellus will be able to do all that.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
I'm done.
Okay. Deputy Mayor is finished. Anyone else? Commissioners? No?
Yeah, just a couple, just one quick point, since you mentioned that obviously this list is somewhat fluid. In some cases, I mean, I guess my preference, just from experience of not only the area of town, having walked it, dealt with it, and lived it, I mean, I would highly suggest 1, 3, 7, and 12 look more like 1, 2, 3, 4, just because of what kind of danger to property and life there is in some of that flooding. I mean, some of my neighbors had 4 feet in their homes. They were literally standing on countertops with water.
Right.
And these aren't exactly, underground property. We're
Right.
not talking about the basement here.
Right.
One thing that I didn't see here, I guess larger concern in all the documents I read through over the last week or so, is once a framework like this is adopted, it doesn't really become a neutral point. It now becomes the commission has already, in essence, moved this forward, but we've got a lot of open-ended costs. I don't see here any cost ceilings, staff caps, reassessment. I know there's going to be additional discussion, but that additional discussion could influence what is in this document as well, because obviously there's a balance. These things don't happen in a vacuum.
Right.
Why not put these all together into one conversation versus having these separate
Are you saying the G Creek project specifically, or all of the projects together?
I mean, everything. We have no cost ceilings, no staffing caps. I mean, I really don't know what the reassessment triggers are. We're talking about future meetings to then talk about money, but the reality is, a vote that I take today, a vote that I may take in the funding type meeting, is going to tie my seat and my, whoever then holds this seat later, to a commitment saying, well, past commissions already agreed to this, and it's open-ended.
Well, I would suggest that, yes, you were right. However, these estimates of cost are extremely conceptual. They could be plus minus 25 to 50%, because we just don't have the on-site specific survey, the actual on-site data to be able to make those conclusions yet. However, this plan is just identifying a need, a project needs list. It will be incorporated into the 5-year CIP budget at your time, that you will be able to adopt that on an annual basis. So if we're implementing projects in there, we're going to have a little bit more of a refined look at how much those cost before we put it in the official adopted budget of the City of Winter Springs. This is just giving you a snapshot of what the needs are and a potential conceptual estimate of what those costs are. I would kind of not argue with you, but caution that these are not fixed costs. They could be plus minus 25 to 50%.
Which, I mean, is a huge delta.
And I think these numbers, when I read it last night, actually have 30% in contingency.
Already, and even then, it's still, like I said, we're looking at 40,000-foot view of what the needs are in the city, and then being able to evaluate that and fold that into a workable plan that then gets that project on the list for further estimated cost.
Yeah, because I mean, my concern there would be that it's very difficult to unwind a government program once it, starts rolling. And I'm not opposed to the goals here. Obviously, I guess I'd be more hesitant to endorse a document that can later be used to bludgeon anybody into, your typical, language that is usually used for or against any of these proposals.
Okay.
I guess there are economies of scale in these size types of projects. You're talking about assets that have to be looked at for purchase. I'm assuming some might be shorter term lease negotiated, items versus others that are going to be longer term capital assets that are going to stay in our books and depreciate and what have you over time. What contingencies does this have? Because I didn't see specifically how, and even thinking downstream concerns. Obviously, what we do here is going to affect outside our borders, just like what somebody outside of our borders could affect us, because that water is going to flow, and it technically flows through us into, Lake Jessup and Soldier Creek and what have you. What coordination is in place to maybe shift some of that burden towards deeper pockets, say the county? Because we're talking about grant money, but grant money is not free. I mean, grant money is still taxpayer dollars, and that means that there's a zero-sum game. So if we got a dollar, someone didn't. And now it's just going to be a legislative priority of whose dollar was more valuable, for the next whatever cycle. And I guess that's where my concern would be. If we're trapped into, multi-millions of dollars worth of path forward, because we're going to set those asset paths way before we hit a shovel on the ground. So we're going to own something. We're going to be dealing with things that we have to budget first, and we have no numbers. I mean, there's no cost shift where, wouldn't some of these projects be better suited for county government even? Or county-wide type?
Well, yes, and yes. Okay. We want to be the masters of our own destiny, and so I think if we were to put the ball entirely in the county's court, we'd be dependent on what their budget schedule is and how often or frequent they might be able to address the city's specific needs through the reaches that run through our city. I fully intend that as we're going through budget development, once we understand what the revenue streams are from the rate study, we're going to have to refine and tweak this a bit just to make sure that the rates aren't so prohibitive to the citizens of the community they can't afford it, or figure out creative ways to be able to finance improvements over time. but then be able to go to the county and other players, such as the adjacent municipalities that drain their systems through these reaches, and be able to work on a joint effort for that. St. John's might be the joint partnership of an ILA potentially, or a joint powers agreement, or we might want to go to the county and ask them to head that up. But certainly there would be a shared resource, I would think, that we would be able to justify whether that funding is actually available from those other sources, such as the county and St. John's. I wouldn't have any idea until we get further along down the road.
But there are opportunities there that.
There should be. I would want to pursue that, but it is a partnership, and it takes two to tango, so to speak, in that relationship. Certainly political influence at that level would be welcome. I would welcome it anyway, if we could get that support once we know what the needs and the costs are, which is the first step. This plan is that first step.
Yeah, and part of my question there kind of was triggered by kind of that thought that came when the gentleman was speaking about the permitting issues, because if you have multiple layers up of bureaucracy that wants to go ahead and have, their hand in the mess, we obviously know what this tax transfer of wealth looks like to all these outside parties, and then you start bringing in other, private market, mitigation costs. I mean, we're talking about land banking. That's not exactly cheap, and that now requires private players to be involved, and a private player is going to have a profit motive. And I mean, I'm always reminded here that, we should never look at the profit motive because it's government, but the reality is, if somebody at the receiving end of the taxpayer dollars has a profit motive, that number ticks up very quickly. And, it's the fiduciary of not, it's not our money, it's the taxpayers' money. I'm just overall concerned about how open-ended everything is. There's no tie-down.
Any other questions?
One
Yeah.
one last thing to add to that, just as we're talking about county priorities and city priorities in the needs assessment. The county in their own studies identified priorities that don't necessarily align with the city's priorities.
Give me an example.
So like these G Creek projects, those were not identified in the county's G Creek study. They had lots of other improvements identified, but they didn't necessarily have the 4 projects that we have shown here. So yes, is there potential for partnership, ILA, that type of thing? Yes. But it's also what the city and what this study is saying the priorities are based on what we as the city know our needs are through the results of the study. That may not perfectly align with the county's priorities. So that's just something to consider as well.
But this would be an influential document to use with the county to be able
Certainly.
to.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
I guess lower our risk exposure would be kind of my thought there.
Absolutely. Yes.
And then appropriations are also not off the table, correct, for any of these projects?
Correct. Yeah.
Possibly.
Right.
Correct.
And it's our responsibility to chase those as best we can, keep
Right.
solid relationships with our delegation. And
Right.
things. Are there other questions? I have one if no one else does. So I didn't see here, and I know that this is yet another budget thing, but, and I acknowledge my knowledge of this topic is shallow, but it's my understanding that that Lake Jessup is being influenced a great deal by nitrates. We know that Oviedo is just budgeted for Zacantec, I believe, is the big boxes where and filters where they're trying to filter out nitrates that are coming in off all of the lawns. And certainly you look at things like Tuscaloosa with all of the bonus S it's putting on everybody's lawns and then it rinses through. That's not in any of this at this time. Is that something that you can speak to?
So we had a little, I'd say a small blurb in there about how we didn't necessarily get into that just because that's it's a whole other set of priorities that we didn't want to mingle with the performance of the stormwater system from a I'll say broadly from a flood risk protection standpoint and the amount of water that, that we as essentially the last line before everything hits the lake, we're dealing with all the upstream communities draining through us. So I'd say broadly in the water world, there's like the water quantity and the water quality as two major issues. And this plan really sought to address the quantity of water we're dealing with. That's not to say the quality is not an issue or something that shouldn't be dealt with, but we didn't tackle that in this.
Okay. So this is saving homes first,
Yes.
and then we can get into the other
Nutrients.
nutrients and things like that that are really having an impact on Lake Jessup. I know Lake Jessup has a both the inlet and the outtake on Lake Jessup are at the extreme eastern end, and so anybody living, in the Soldiers Creek end or Parkstone down on that end are very well familiar with that algae blooms and growing and
Yeah,
things like that.
don't get much movement
so-
through there. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess, this will continue to be, I've said it 1,000 times, it'll continue to be an issue that our community deals with for decades. This is making some very formal, very early steps towards addressing these stormwater issues. Right. Any other comments? Seeing none. Well, there's certainly a lot more reading to do. And certainly the county stormwater study is available online as well. That's
Correct.
pretty extreme. That's a pretty big document. So at any rate.
So, City Manager, is your request that we vote on this to adopt the stormwater master plan as it's presented, and then the intent to bring back January 12th, the dollars and cents study?
Yes,
Part one?
yes, that's accurate for next steps moving forward. As has been said many times during the presentation, this document's a fluid document. Continuous understanding that things will change and priorities will change, and funding is a major component of that. So if we get a grant prioritization, might switch something if it's an eligible grant activity. And obviously keeping in mind, our rate analysis and the impact to our residents. So, but yeah, that's the direction that we're looking to go in.
So we would need a motion to accept this study, and then we're going to start taking steps in future meetings as discussed, and dates that appears almost certain.
Yes, that's correct. This has been an ongoing thing as far as the rate analysis, building this. As Clete said, it's been an 18-month. Raftellus has been hand in hand with that. I've sat in numerous meetings myself on that, looking at the total staffing level plans, equipment. There's been already a lot of that work has already happened, but until they have kind of finalization and to be able to build it into their model, we need to have the plan adopted so that they can kind of finalize what that looks like.
Okay.
If I may, David, you're here, Hamster. So I know you've got a lot of experience in this. We've talked a bit about grants. Commissioner brought up grants. Page 84, 5 also talks about grants. Is there a significant number of grants out there for us to possibly move forward with, or are we just talking for the sake of talking?
For major flood protection projects, it's a pretty limited window with FEMA and the state, which is FDEM, the Florida Division of Emergency Management. As you all know, the FEMA is being revamped by the current administration. I don't know what the final outcome is going to be. Based on if you listen to President Trump, he wants to push that responsibility to the state. How the state then generates millions and billions of dollars to pay for this will be the next major step. But when it comes to flood protection projects, the ones that Matt is referencing, like G Creek, Soldiers Creek, Howell Creek, those flood protection, our best opportunity, unfortunately, is when a major storm comes through and it opens up the windows for our 75% grants. The grants that the local government has, like St. John's, they're pretty small in scale, $25,000, $50,000, not quite the juice we need to get a good control of the G Creek system, for example. And then the mayor had asked about water quality. There's tons of water quality grants that are out there by the states, but water quality could be equally expensive, if not more, than flood protection because of the retrofitting old areas to reduce nitrogen and phosphorus. And so those funds are readily available every year, not based on declared events, but you have to commit to treating areas that are not being currently treated, and it can't be part of a development because they have to treat their water anyways. So if you want to look at those things separately down the road for funding of water quality versus flood protection. But to this day, until things get drastically overhauled, it's either FEMA or potentially the Division of Emergency Management in the state, so.
Because I'm looking at one, the Springs and Watershed Restoration Program. I don't know if that fits us, but like I was looking at DEP grants a bit ago. Commissioner also talked about that. That would be somewhere we would go, is ask DEP if they have anything.
Yeah, DEP is the primary contact for water quality grants.
Water quality?
Yep.
No. Okay.
Septic to sewer, cleaning up dirty water from stormwater runoff, creating regional stormwater ponds, not for flood protection, but for treating some older areas. Yes, that's, DEP is your best bet on that, so.
So as we wrap our head around this, our reality really is grants are going to be limited. So we have to kind of dig, city manager.
It's taking painfully slow the last couple of years to get our grants approved from, we're still dealing with Irma from 2017. Ian is way behind schedule, that was 2022. Of course, Milton for some parts of the state were horrific, so it's going to be many years to get all those dollars vetted. NRCS has been a great conduit, but they're creek maintenance, they're not flood protection, so.
Right.
Yeah, we were very fortunate. Sometimes we can get large sums of money. Just as an example, the wastewater treatment plant, and the federal government passed through some money to the state, and then the state passed it down to us, and that's where that $20 million that was announced last month came from. That was directly tied to Hurricane Milton and wastewater spills, and as a result of a declared emergency, they released certain amounts of money. We were able to capitalize on that. So we have to keep our eyes open. Sometimes something like Milton and wastewater, that moved comparatively quickly, and we had the approval of the 20 million. But other ones, Hurricane Ian and Irma and things, again, are still going to be some time. Does that sound about right?
Yep.
Yeah. So we have to, our responsibility is to continue chasing all those funds, and I think with the city leadership and the city manager and his team, Cleet and everyone else, really, that they are ultimately tasked with that, but we have to do our political part and stay informed, like this meeting.
Right.
Just to add to that, Mr. Mayor, obviously that's our first kind of approach, looking at grant opportunities and things like that. But as I've warned in the past, I mean, particularly at the federal level, and David can attest to what we're dealing with NRCS and FEMA and the backlog and the difficulty. But I think as we consider this plan, when those opportunities present themselves, we're going to be ready for that. But I think, from what I'm seeing, specifically at the federal level, at least during this current administration, I would not feel comfortable with relying on that, because we're going to be talking about these projects that need to be addressed 3 years from now, and still talking.
Right.
I think we need to be from the position, we're going to look at how we're going to fund it and take care of ourselves locally. And if opportunities arise, we'll continue to beat that drum, but not rely on that as a major component of this.
100% agree, yep.
And that's what I wanted to put on the table.
Okay. Commissioner Bruce?
Yeah, quick question. During public comment period, 2 questions came up from the audience. One is, why wasn't the GID parcels included or evaluated or in this study? Maybe they didn't make the cut. And also the wetlands park outfall, maybe because that's already being worked on, I'm not sure.
Sure, I'll discuss the wetland park first, since we're working on that. First of all,
Real good one.
Gina's here and I don't see her. Do not call St. John's. They're not the obstacle. All they suggested is they didn't like where the pipe was proposed because there was too many wetland impacts. So they suggested we look at a different alternative. So we have gone to the state and to Seminole County to realign the pipe to minimize the wetland impacts. We've had some positive dialogue with the county, kind of using the trail corridor to minimize the wetland impacts, and that appears to be favorable. So our staff has worked with Cleet and Peter and them to realign, and then we'll be resubmitting that. But don't rattle their cage yet. I don't want to cause any problem. As far as your first question, I can't speak on behalf of Matt, but since that was unincorporated Seminole County, we were really focusing on city of Winter Springs, just like Seminole County studies, like Matt said, all their potential projects are taking care of their own. They're not doing projects specifically within city limits I'm aware of.
Yeah,
So,
but Jetta Park or Jetta Point and GID is in the city limits.
All right, I'll get with Matt and the
Okay.
gangs there.
Okay, cool.
All right.
I'd be very curious. So because, boy, that is a beautiful stretch down there in the boat club and things like that that are down there really are, it really is beautiful, but it has a very significant history of flooding on that little road if you've been down there.
Sure,
Like
and it goes
after-
into Jerry's yard. That's-
Yeah,
he's very
it's
worried about it.
catastrophic, the flooding that they have been it's just, this week was talking to another resident there, and the flooding, the historic flooding there is catastrophic. Like after storms, you can't get down that road and over and over and over again. But that's, GID hasn't even been developed yet. So there's a certain amount of shedding or the water sheeting towards Lake Jessup. But then and I'm also, I guess what I'm looking for is a lot of that flooding, in my opinion, and I'd like some clarification, is it from the sheeting off of GID, which I think that's part of it, but more of it's the rest of Central Florida putting water into Lake Jessup during hurricanes like Hurricane Ian, and that raises St. John's, raises Lake Jessup, and then, so the water isn't necessarily,
Perfect
although
storm.
some of it is coming from GID, it's more coming from the other side up, and there is, I don't know that there is any way of stopping that. Does that sound, am I reading that right?
So, yeah, you're correct.
guessing.
There are two things happening, right? You've got the sheet flow just happening locally, and then, yeah, you've got the lake, which the lake is gonna do what it does with all the upstream areas contributing to it, because, you know, there's all those other municipalities, it goes all the way, I think, into Orange County. Some of these watersheds do. So, yeah, all of that is impacting the lake, in addition to, of course, the contributions from St. John's itself. So, yeah, there's I'd say in the lower areas of that area, the lake is going to have more of an impact, and then in the kind of upper to mid areas, as that sheet flow builds up, you're going to have more of the issues related to that sheet flow. Wetlands Park, I just wanted to jump back to that real quick. One of the projects in the list of 12 projects, it's not, Wetlands Park, of course, is an ongoing project, but I believe it's Lake Jessup 1 is, it's a few streets over, it's just downstream of the Wetlands Park to improve one of the culvert crossings there. So I just wanted to draw that to your attention as well.
Which project would that have been?
I believe
Jessup
it's
1,
Lake
you said?
Jessup 1.
Tuscarora Road, outfall, the pipe replacement,
What number is that, though?
10.
Thank you.
So,
Yeah.
okay.
Okay, so I would ask for a motion to accept this report so that we can then make decisions moving forward. They will be fluid decisions or as we move forward, but this will be a start.
I'll make a motion to approve item 500 as presented.
Motion's made by the deputy mayor. Can I get a second?
I'll second.
Second by Commissioner Bruce. Christian?
Commissioner Diaz.
Aye.
Commissioner Bruce.
Aye.
Commissioner Baker.
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Resnick.
Aye.
Commissioner Crusoe.
All right.
And motion passes unanimously. All right, well, that brings us back to public input again, and same rules apply. This is, again, a starting point. And anyone that would like to talk after we've, sir, if you'd like some more time, yeah, Mr. Wood.
I'd like to clarify a couple of things that I've heard here. I do appreciate how much you have to work on this, because I've been an engineer for 40 years, and it was hard for me to digest that report. I don't know how you people can actually do it. It's got to be a challenge. But with regard to the part of the city contributions in the area that I'm representing, it's totally untrue that the only flooding occurs from Lake Jessup. in Milton, the water went through the houses on Lake Street 3 days before the lake came up. They didn't even have a chance. It blew them right out. I have been the caretaker of Clifton Springs for 35 years, not all of it, because it took a while to put the pieces together, but I've been there. I've had water coming down through the GID, through Lake Street, and back up over my land bridge and weir in reverse. And this has been going on for some time. I go out there and I go, holy smokes. I didn't say it like that, but I don't want to make you mad. The water is coming up in reverse because there's no outfall for that. I do understand the problem. I've been working in this realm for some time. I did the Ranger Drainage District for 5 years. So that's a big district. That's 5,000 acres. I understand stormwater. I helped write the 40C4 rule. But there's got to be a way that the city took that property in on some kind of a deal. And I'm not sure how many devils were in that deal, and even right when the 417 went through. But there's got to be a way that the city can actually lean on that property to do some stormwater controls. Horizontal check dams and a lot of other things could go a long way to abating that type of overland flow. That flow came so hard that it rafted grass up 2 feet on the fences, because it collects the grass and the sticks and the leaves. You're talking about a pretty good, we had about a foot of water coming through those fences, and that's a lot of pressure, and that's a lot of erosion. I think there's probably maybe 300,000 or 400,000, 3,000 or 4,000 cubic yards of material from the grove in the Clifton Springs right now. I'm trying to figure out a way to get it out of there. It's not clear to me what control you have over this undeveloped property. And I'm sure that none of you were even here when those deals were made, except maybe him. But
Anthony, yeah?
Yeah.
25 years?
yeah, he'd have to go deep into some door to figure out why he did that, but he probably knows. The thing is, it's kind of like you bought a pig in a poke, and now it's a big problem. And I'm not sure what you can do about it, but you ought to think about it. I'm going to think about it. I'm probably going to write another letter that uses the time a little better and breaks it down a little bit more clearly what the issues are, because I got it, all the data. And I'll bring it back to you for your consideration, and at least you're advised that that's a problem. I know that Missy Cassell's and the Elizabeth Morris Genius Foundation are well aware it's a problem. I put them on notice, and the Expressway Authority knows it's a problem. Last but not least, the Expressway Authority is actually one of the big reasons that we have that problem. When the 417 came through, it cut off that weeping hammock that went northeast to Lake Jessup, and I don't have I didn't bring my backup here, but that actually took the southern 135 acres and rammed it right down the 417 guideline. That's why it comes around Lake Street and comes back up. So these aren't natural things that happen. With regards to the flooding, you are right. The water comes up to Spring Creek, which is actually a private creek, right next to the cabin that I live in. And it does get into Nancy Drive in the back there. And those are issues that those people are dealing with by raising their houses up. But that's no reason to tolerate 300 acres sending sheet flow water in our direction. But maybe there's something that can be done to convince them to do something different.
Yeah, I think it's sir, I think I commend you for coming in and saying something and making sure that it stays, that we keep attention and that
I
it
know,
stays
I
there.
drove from Bureau to do it. I have to go back.
Does it really important, because
Well, thank you.
frankly, without coming in and saying something, we would not have
It's
necessarily
my
thought about it.
obligation.
Yeah,
Thank you.
we
Thank you for
appreciate you
doing it.
taking the time. It's, that really a whole nother level of things to think about. It is important. Colonel, did I see you fill out a form? Did you want to? Thanks.
Good morning, Mayor. Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Tim Wansberry. I'm the treasurer of the Howell Creek Reserve Homeowners Association. I really wasn't planning to speak this morning. I saw the discussion about in the next month or so, you're going to have some more discussions about utility rates and stuff. I probably won't be here, but I wanted to share with you a message that we presented to the city mayor, or the city manager. Commissioner Bruce helped us set up a meeting with those folks. We, in our HOA, have a very aggressive, I would say, stormwater management program for our HOA. We've got 263 homeowners. We've got 5 ponds. In the last 5 years, as I've been the treasurer, I'm tracking dollars and cents. We've spent close to $160,000 in maintaining our ponds and our stormwater infrastructure. We benefit from the fact that the city offers for residents who live inside gated communities a 25% break on your stormwater utility rates. Doesn't sound like a lot of money. Back 6 months ago, when the rates were a lot lower, we were saving probably about $4,000. 263 people, do the math, okay? Now we're saving $2.50 every month, okay? That's $30 a year. That's less than $8,000. We're spending over $30,000 a year in maintaining our stormwater infrastructure. What I would argue, or what I would ask you folks, when you start doing your utility discussions, that you give consideration to the folks that live in the gated communities, because although we are not the public stormwater infrastructure, we are certainly part of the city of Winter Springs stormwater infrastructure. If we don't do our job, then, then that affects a lot of other folks. I suggested to the city manager something that you all might want to consider is if you have an HOA, a gated community that can come in and can demonstrate how much money we are actually spending versus, what the folks who don't live in a gated community, and we understand. We live in a gated community, we understand what the rules are, but when we're spending that kind of money, I'm looking at one more pond to do this year, probably $60,000, $70,000 for 263 people. That's a lot of money. So again, keep the 25% credit. 50% would be better. It's better than a sharp stick in the eye, as my dad used to say. See what you can do for us, okay? Appreciate it. Thank you.
That's a great point. I know we're not supposed to comment, but I had not actually thought about it from that perspective before. I was thinking, we're going to go work on private ponds, and they don't pay as much. So, yeah, that's a really, thank you for that. I appreciate it. Anyone else? Mr. Gallo.
Art Gallo, 199 Indiana Terrace. I just wanted to thank the city, the commission, Mr. Saunier and his team for all the hard work. Although I came up here earlier and said, I was against the master plan, but I did say that I didn't want to impugn the great work, because there was a lot of work that went into this study. I think the commission did right by approving it as a starting point. My expectation going in is that this is a work in progress as a plan, and that as Mr. Saunier and the city manager get more information from the water basin studies or whatever, that will improve on it. And I think I offered some suggestions for the HOAs and private property owners that don't have ponds, that have creeks running through it, that we may be private, but we're part of the overall stormwater system. And if I was a good at public speaking and a great lawyer or whatever, I would argue that it is a public utility, our creeks and ponds, because if something happens in my backyard, it's going to impact a lot more than just me. So I think we've neglected this argument, or we've avoided it, or we haven't thought of it, I don't know, for many years. And I'm hoping that we'll address that in the future. And I want to thank you for all your hard work, especially those of the team that put the plan together. Although it's not perfect, it is a good starting point. And so I appreciate the opportunity to come here and talk to you about it. And I'm giving the city clerk a couple things to put in the record for me, too. So I'll work with him on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Gallo. Anyone else? I think that wraps up the residents that are here. So with that, I'll end public input. just say in closing, we appear to be moving rapidly forward on the replacement of the wastewater treatment plants. That was a massive priority for the city over the last 4 years. This, again, will be this is rapidly going to move into first place as those wastewater treatment plants get built over the next 4 years. This will be something that our community deals with for decades, and we can never take our eye off the ball on that issue. As Central Florida continues to grow, that water and more impervious surfaces, that water's going to need somewhere to go. So again, thank you, commission members, city staff, consultants and staff, everyone that's participated in this. It's the right first big step. So thank you very much. With that, we are adjourned.
Happy holidays, Merry Christmas.